So why is Calvinism so dangerous? I've been going through these videos and kind of talking about my testimony, my personal journey in and out of Calvinism after being a Calvinist for 18 years. And the reason I think that it's so dangerous is because we all struggle in our walk. We're human. There's going to be times in our life, even in our Christian walk, where we're going to struggle with certain things and we're going to do things that we regret and make mistakes. The problem is that if you wholeheartedly believe that God determines everything that happens in the world, that like John Piper says, even our besetting sins. R.C. Sproul said that he doesn't believe that there's even one rogue molecule in the universe, So if you believe that way and you find yourself at a point in your Christian walk where you're struggling with a particular thing, you can kind of rest easy, right? Because you couldn't have done anything otherwise. If you wholeheartedly believe that God determines everything, then you're sort of in his will in a way, because you're exactly where he wants you to be. And that's where the danger lies. And what the real kicker for me was, though, is that when I started to have doubts about God and whether he was even there, like when I really started to question his existence. If Calvinism is true, that means that God has determined for me to doubt his existence. And, I couldn't do otherwise. I couldn't be any other way. I used to rationalize it like, maybe this is just part of the sanctification process that God has, like my sanctification story. And like down the road, maybe I'm going to be interacting with somebody who's also struggling with doubt, and like God, pulling me through this is going to be a means that he's going to use in the future to, speak to someone else. And so all I know for certain is that God has determined all things that happen in my life. So I am ultimately exactly where he wants me to be, and I couldn't do otherwise. The problem is that I believe that this type of thinking fueled my apathy. As I began to go down a downward spiral in my life and walk away from the Lord, my belief that everything that happened in my life, even my bad decisions, were ultimately God determining every single thing in my life. It led me to a point where I believed, if I don't desire to do what's right, it's because God hasn't given me the desire to do what's right at this point in my life. And I know that because my evil desires have come to pass, and he determines whatsoever's come to pass. And when he's ready for me to get my life right with him, like to really get serious and to have a quiet time and pray, read my Bible, that's going to have to be something that he's determined for my life at a particular point in my life. All I know right now is that that's not what he's determined for me now. If that is not just an absolute perfect recipe for a spiritual crisis, I don't know what is. Ultimately, it led me to a point when I started to doubt whether God was even there. It led me to a point where I believed that I had only one of two options. Either God was not real, and I have determined to doubt him, and I have determined that he's possibly not even there, or God is real, and he has determined me to doubt him. He has determined for me to wonder if he's even there. But where was the third option of God is really there, but I have determined to doubt him? I am responsible. I've decided to question whether he's even there. And nothing's going to change until I get off my butt and I stop being spiritually lazy and I start reading my Bible and praying and actually asking God for help in my life and being able to understand these questions that I have and answer these questions that I have. And so I'm going to continue to speak out against Calvinism. It's something that I'm passionate about. And even if you're a Calvinist and you're set on that, maybe I can help you avoid some of the same pitfalls that I encountered. So for anybody that's interested, I'm going to keep putting out videos on this. So I'm going to finish this video out just kind of going over a possible rebuttal that Calvinists may have against my argument over Ephesians 1, 3 and 4. And just the argument that I was making that Paul says that God has blessed us in Christ, in union with Christ, being connected to Christ with every spiritual blessing. But at the same time, they claim that we were chosen. Even though Paul lists chosen as being a spiritual blessing, they claim that we were chosen before the foundation of the world, before we were in union with Christ through faith. And so I just want to go over a possible rebuttal for that. So, what would we say to someone like John Piper, who, for example, who claims that believers have always been connected to Christ. I got my notes right here. That claim that believers have always been connected to Christ in some way. And that's how Paul can say that every spiritual blessing is found in Christ or connected to Christ in Ephesians 1:3, where Paul says that God has blessed us in Christ with every spiritual blessing. So what do we say to a Calvinist who claims, we don't think that believers possess the spiritual blessing of being chosen outside of Christ, because being chosen, we have always been connected to Christ before the foundation of the world. Okay, so this is an argument that I used to use when I was a Calvinist, and if you're watching and you're a Calvinist, maybe this is a response that you've heard, or maybe you've even used it before, but I want to try to demonstrate that this argument is based on a logical fallacy, and I want to point that fallacy out for y'all so you can see, and you can understand exactly why the argument fails, in my opinion. Paul speaks of being connected to Christ as a prerequisite for being blessed with every spiritual blessing, and he lists being chosen as an example of a spiritual blessing. But how can being connected to Christ be a prerequisite for the spiritual blessing of being chosen, when Calvinists claim that being chosen is the means through which we have been connected to Christ? So I believe this argument fails because it's based on the logical fallacy of circular reasoning. So if Paul says being in Christ is the means through which all spiritual blessings come, and then list being chosen as a spiritual blessing, how can Calvinists come along and say, well, no, actually being chosen is the means through which believers have always been in Christ, always been connected to Christ? Either all spiritual blessings come through means of being connected to Christ, or they don't. But you can't rationally claim that all spiritual blessings come through means of being connected to Christ, and at the same time claim that a spiritual blessing, being chosen, is the means through which we were always connected to Christ. It's like saying we're chosen because we've always been connected to Christ, and we're always connected to Christ because we've always been chosen. And so I hope this helps. And for anybody who's interested, like I said, I'm going to keep putting out more videos going over popular Calvinist proof text, and also digging deeper into what Calvinists believe. So y'all have a good day and good night.